Now that Black Flag Resynced is out, I'd like to take a moment to be sad for everyone who will now consider this the definitive edition of Black Flag and never touch the original. Because the original was a complete beast, a technological marvel. Before our time back in 2013, the ocean never looked this good. Seamless gameplay where you could just run out of town and dive straight into the ocean? Unheard of. Rest in peace, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. You will be missed. Remember all the greatness this game brought to the table and all the toil behind it. The painstaking 3 years spent on ship physics, the torture of dual-wielding deployment for 7th gen consoles, and then brand new PS4 and Xbox One. The collaborative efforts of 8 Ubisoft studios working together as one. As Black Flag leaves us, Black Flag Resynced greets us. It's time for a deep dive into what made this game as monumental as it was. A boatload of technological innovation and needle-precise implementation, not only on the sea it's most famous for, but from land to sea to sky. This is an autopsy, a technical retrospective, if you will, of the original Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Since Ubisoft was extremely generous with their behind-the-scenes process and reflections on this game back in 2013, this is a beefy video, so feel free to fast travel to whichever section most excites you. Now let's set sail! The original Black Flag was built at a pivotal moment on the cusp of the 7th and 8th generation of consoles, on a brand new in-house game engine, and as a new beginning for the franchise after Assassin's Creed 3 ended a culturally acclaimed trilogy. This game had one goal, and one goal only: seamless gameplay. This preview from 2013 hilariously recounts: if I had taken a drink every time the game's associate producer, Sylvain Trottier, had told me the game would be seamless or flowing, I'd be hospitalized.
The very exciting thing that we have is the seamless boarding.
But what we want to show off here is the seamlessness. Again, it's seamless as well.
Seamless access. Seamless experience.
Make everything seamless.
And for the most part, this game was seamless, with nary a loading screen in sight. To achieve this, a major overhaul to Ubisoft's proprietary game engine was undertaken. Ubisoft Montreal was responsible for the development of the game's core rendering technology, and they rewrote the rendering schedule for all platforms from the ground up to fully utilize the power of the latest hardware at the time. This was a great feat. Because the rendering schedule dictated the order in which game world objects are populated, it was integral to loading new parts of Black Flag's seamless world as you traveled through it. Next, to combat the increased depth of the open world they had to populate, the development team created a long-range grid responsible for loading far-away objects. The process of loading things in games is actually very neat, because you have to juggle your hardware constraints with the efficiency in which you deliver data. The previous Assassin's Creed games had a grid that continued to handle everything nearby: dense, detailed land areas, buildings, and foliage. This added long-range grid loaded far away objects as well, to give the feeling of being able to see super far into the distance. But despite the shiny new schedule being observably better than previous titles, you can still catch NPCs off guard while they're in the process of rendering in. Sometimes, in dense city environments, you can see them popping in and out. Although I'm told that a smoother dithering effect was used on the asset streaming to try and ease in the popping, if you hide behind walls and peek out, you can catch NPCs rendering from nothingness to their T-pose to their assigned pose. How embarrassing! Just kidding. It's actually really fun to catch them in real time. Anyways, although seamless rendering had the occasional hiccup, overall, the game still holds up to the modern day. Unfortunately, Melanie has left us though. Rest in peace, Melanie! Besides, rendering's not the only thing this game's got going for it in the seamless department. The developers focused on a seamless gameplay loop between the different environments and the dual focuses of Black Flag: pirating and assassinating. They meticulously added relationships between on-land assassin activities and on-sea pirate activities. Everyone's favorite sea shanties, for example, were required to be collected through assassin parkouring before they could be sung on your pirate ship. Aiding pirates on land caused them to join your crew at sea, and after making a huge mess of sinking and pillaging ships at sea, you would start getting chased by bounty hunters. So you'd have to run to land and bribe an officer to lower your wanted level to get them off your tail. Features like this really helped unify and meld together the entire gameplay experience. Finally, everything had to be visually and thematically seamless as well. During pre-production, Ubisoft hired a military expert and pirate literature author to research the setting. Edward's iconic design was the output of a seamless collaboration between Ubisoft studios to visually signal both assassin and pirate. For the elegant aesthetic of the assassins, they brought in the eagle iconography and the hood and layered it onto a base pirate outfit. What's super fun is how concept art was seamlessly translated into brand new features in the game as well. This concept art of a fort looked so nice that the team decided to implement the ability to capture forts in-game. The way the artists painted the light blue water here actually inspired the engineers to come up with shallow water technology in the game engine Anvil Next. Further, this piece of concept art, titled Drunk on Rum, directed engineers to blend everything together when they were developing the effects of inebriation. Finally, although it was of great importance that Black Flag be distinguished from AC3, which had an overlapping development period, what was more important was seamless story and gameplay continuity between titles. And what's even crazier is that Black Flag was supposed to be a DLC of Assassin's Creed 3, based off of AC3's naval combat. And since AC3's naval combat was linear and restrictive, they wanted to develop this and improve on this exponentially. Of course, eventually Black Flag became way too good of a concept to just be a DLC and was expanded into the next main title, developed in parallel with AC3 with a different core team. Anyways, its humble beginnings as a naval combat DLC made naval combat the core of the gameplay loop.
And with that, it's time to talk about the sea.
The ocean itself is honestly one of the greatest achievements we've made. It's fully physics simulated, but we have full control over it. If we wanted to go from a calm sea to an intense hurricane, we can do it. It feels natural and normal and logical, and it's beautiful visually. The guys who pulled it off, my hats off to them. Of course, for a pirate game, the sea better be done right, and done right it was. The daunting task of creating an explorable ocean world was assigned to Ubisoft Singapore, which, from the ground up, built a brand new system for underwater exploration. The amount of technology that the team churned out is insanely stacked. They traveled to the Caribbean, taking thousands of photographs to study the ocean's behavior, as well as its effects on its surrounding sand and the way it reacted to sunlight to create a sense of depth. Then, they built out features for the ocean's coloring, movement, particles, audio, reflectivity, and physics. On top of that, they had to make systems to support Edward's swimming, and even simulations for sea foam, which reacts differently depending on what it collides with. Here's sea foam on sand, here's sea foam on rocks, and of course, sea foam wasn't the only thing that moved tremendously. What about the sea itself? From placid and chill to a storm of Shakespearean pathetic fallacy, the sea had a life of its own. But not really. Its life was programmed into it.
It's game science time! The first layer in making the ocean was to create its base geometry. Let's sculpt one ourselves. Kinda looks like the sea, right? This is a flat-ish 3D surface made up of these guys. A bunch of polygons. Onto the base geometry of our ocean, we'll drape a texture layer over it to give it its look. For some simple movement to make it really come alive, a normal map was layered next. A normal is the fancy game design term of where a particular point on the geometry is facing. By changing where a point is facing over time, we get movement. sea, by having an animated normal map, different points on the geometry move slightly, creating gentle ripple effects on the surface. On 8th gen consoles, the geometry was even more detailed, with 4 times the amount of vertices. A vertex is one of these points here. I cover vertices and animations much more in depth in this video about Devil May Cry 5, so you can check that out if you want. In summary though, a vertex is just a single point on a game object. The more you have, the more smooth and detailed you can make the base geometry of the ocean. The result is a detailed, realistic movement like this. Another layer on the ocean was reflectivity. Depending on the intensity of lighting conditions, the glossiness changes as well. This mirror-like highlight that appears on the ocean is better known as the fancy game design term of specular sheen. And it looks great here. On 7th gen consoles, the ocean reflects light from the sun and the moon. On the 8th gen consoles, even dynamic lights are reflected. When water washes up onto the jackdaw, that water reflects the sky too, all according to the wind conditions. It's all these tiny little reflections catching everything that's happening above the waves that makes this ocean look so believable. Now for the movement of the water. What's exceptional about the original Black Flag's ocean is how it's programmatically dynamic. This means that it moves and reacts to different conditions. It's a little intelligent, you might say. Real-life oceans do this as well. They look completely different depending on if it's a chill, placid day or a stormy, thunderous night. To describe the real-life behavior of oceans, we need to give some thanks to the Brits, specifically the British Royal Navy. They created a concept called the Beaufort Wind Force Scale, which is a value assigned to how an ocean's winds and waves behave. The higher the number, the more violent the waves. This scale has been widely adopted internationally, so we'll use it here as well. In Assassin's Creed 3, the Beaufort level was a predetermined constant, and the team had to use a camera cut whenever they wanted to change what the waves looked like. But in Black Flag, the waves are actually dynamic. The team set a starting Beaufort level for each mission, because sometimes you really do need a storm for a storm, but it would change depending on the ship's location and the weather. For the 8th gen consoles, the PS4 and the Xbox One, the team was able to take it up multiple notches. First, the obvious stuff. More processing power meant smoother movement and less jittering, most notably on the ocean storms, which had high Beaufort turbulence. Wave physics also received an upgrade, with 3 wave frequencies being simulated as opposed to just 2. For comparison, a real ocean has effectively an infinite amount of wave frequencies. Modern day games have hundreds to thousands, but a jump from 2 to 3 is still a meaningfully modest upgrade, and it looked great. Moreover, enhanced movement wasn't only limited to the waves themselves. Edward's ship, the Jackdaw, wasn't choreographed whatsoever. In fact, it moved dynamically with the current of the waves, and even took in water onto its deck as it moved. This was all written into the Jackdaw's artificial intelligence, its nav mesh. Now, nav mesh is just the fancy game design term for a pathfinding program, written specifically for navigating between objects and complex environments. Aside from the Jackdaw's nav mesh, there was boarding between ships, and if you played the game, you know why. When you start pillaging, your ship hooks onto the enemy and reels them in. The 2 ships meet somewhere in the middle. According to the developers, boarding was the hardest feature in the game to develop, and what they had to solve for? Dozens of NPC AI, 2 ships, totally dynamic platforms, and finally the ocean, also dynamic. During boarding, your crew of NPCs had to jump between these 2 ships, which meant that their navigation systems had to solve for 2 reference locations. In one moment, the NPC could make a jump between the 2 ships, but in the next, the waves could move slightly such that the jump was now impossible. To make things even more difficult for themselves, jumping wasn't the only action your NPCs could take. They could also swing across through a rope or shimmy along a rope. All of these decisions and movements had to be calculated through the game's dynamic nav mesh technology as well to chart the best path. So the game really blew it out of the water when it came to boarding. Now, to fully conquer the sea, we need to talk about the Jackdaw. The team spent 3 years doing the Jackdaw and other ships' physics for the solo campaign. There were many aspects of the Jackdaw that had to be considered. First, the team viewed it as its own character, an avatar. They expected players to bond with it, establishing a psychological connection and self-association with it. In your mind, the Jackdaw's shadow would become your shadow. And since this ship was an avatar and an extension of Edward's character, they designed it to embody his outlandishness. They decided to name it the Jackdaw because of its proximity to both pirating and the assassin's trademark eagle. The goal of the Jackdaw was to be a ship whose silhouette and sleekness resembled both its captain Edward and the pirate assassin jackdaw bird it was named after. Aside from the aesthetics, the Jackdaw as an avatar brought on many important game design decisions to be made. It's chonky, so where does the camera go? How does it zoom? How does it pan? How realistic should it be? Before the final ship mechanics we see, the team went through multiple prototypes for sailing, some very accurate to reality, but these initial prototypes were not so intuitive. Although it was important that the ship was believable and realistic, reactive to the wind and the waves, it was much more important for the ship to be fun, considering how much time you spend being the Jackdaw. In the end, they chose a design that balanced intuition with fun and simplicity. Overall, from the geometry to the reflectivity to the movement, the resulting ocean is stunning even now in 2026. In fact, the look and feel and performance of the ocean was so sublime that the dev team decided to forego tessellation, the fancy game design term for a powerful technique that dynamically increases the detail of 3D models by adding more vertices. By forgoing tessellation, the team used a unified, singular rendering technique for the ocean across all platforms, from PC to the Xbox 360 to the Wii U to the PS4. This meant that they could skip the computationally demanding GPU workload of tessellation while maintaining stable performance and prioritizing visual consistency. And now it's time for us to dock. Let's get on to land. AC4 saw many brand new environments, from the beautiful port cities of Havana, Nassau, and Kingston, to the tiny explorable islands, to the thick and dense jungles. In the game's sparkly new engine, a brand new vegetation system was developed. Foliage had default animation, sometimes as simple as a 2D skewing, which is the fancy game design term for this. And on the 8th gen consoles, foliage was composed of fully 3D models with their own physics, causing plants to react to Edward's movements. The result was a beautiful jungle system with thousands of individually rendered reactive plants with their own bones and animations. Additionally, there was a new wildlife system, populating the land with huntable mammals and critters. These guys had basic programs and would react to Edward's movements, like these birds that would fly away when startled. And what about the animals in the cities? The humans? Well, thanks to the new and improved Anvil Next engine, around 2,000 NPCs could be displayed at once, happily populating the port town environment as they lazed about, got into fights, and all sorts of trouble. Yet Black Flag couldn't conquer all of what moving across land had to offer. One of Edward's fatal flaws? No, it's not his impossibly dashing ruggedness. Or the fact that everyone he loves around him ends up dying. It's that despite being able to climb and swing and grapple and leap, he can't crouch. If he's not in a bush, that is. Crouching was one of the last features added during the development cycle, but it was so buggy that it was completely scrapped. So during all the sneaky sections, Tection worked like this. An enemy's line of sight was made by drawing a line from his head to Edward's head. Unfortunately, when Edward crouched, a bit of his big forehead peeked over objects like crates and walls, which meant that even though he was crouching, enemies could still see him. One fix would be to make walls taller, but parkour was dependent on wall heights, so that would be a complete mess. Changing detection would also be a Herculean task, so In the end, Edward became a man who can do everything, but crouch whenever he wanted, all because of his big forehead. Finally, let's all turn our big foreheads up and take a look at the sky. With Black Flag Sky, the team wanted a fully comprehensive and dynamic weather system to set the tone for the historical 18th century atmosphere. This included time of day changes as well as upgraded lighting and volumetric fog. The fancy game design term, where instead of having fog as a texture like earlier, it's made from a 3D grid across the game scene, where each cell contains lighting, shadow, and density information. In fact, the original Black Flag pioneered volumetric fog as we know it, introducing it into the great canon of modern gaming rendering techniques. Anyways, to get back to the dynamism of this sky, the team rewrote the majority of their lighting system to support this thing called dynamic global illumination. I've already covered this fancy game design term in a previous video about Resident Evil, so you can check that out if you're interested. In summary though, global illumination is a pretty big deal. It's basically the environment's lighting and a huge part of what makes a scene look realistic. For global illumination, aka environmental lighting, the team got very specific. The lighting for a scene was computed every frame during runtime, the result of the current state of the game world. First, the final lighting result was dependent on atmospheric conditions and time of day, and second, it was dependent on location. This means that every environment on land stored information on what lighting looked like for every single combination of weather condition and hour of day. You can think of it like one giant formula that takes in a bunch of information about the current state and just spits out what the lighting needs to look like after. Because the game did this for every frame, the result was that weather sequences were extremely reactive and diverse. Further, the team crafted a brand new 3D rain system, which rendered each raindrop individually. As if that wasn't minuscule enough, each raindrop contained thousands of particles that could be affected by lighting and location. Each particle of a raindrop could reflect light and collide with the environment. The result? A rain system that can generate ripples that react to the wind on the fly. Final result was a sky that feels just as alive as the rest of the game, which is now dead. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag really was a technological marvel. It pioneered naval combat and seamless world traversal, making the quintessential pirate assassin game.
Of all the money that I'm
not sure how much of the team knew just how big it would become when it started out as just an Assassin's Creed 3 DLC. From the land to the sky to the sea, this game made monumental improvements on all fronts of design and implementation.
At last it was to none but me.
But what I'll miss the most about it is what all this technology culminated to: the world. The world of Black Flag was gritty. It felt dirty almost, lived in and real. Although Black Flag Resynced is stunning, with its rain being more rainy and its wind being more windy and its sea foam being more sea foamy, it is undeniably more handsome. But I can't help but feel some longing for the original, which to me really breathes an adventure where I wouldn't be surprised if all my men got scurvy. And in Resynced, Edward looks good. Not so much a scoundrel. He has beautiful glowing skin that might be the result of modern day lighting techniques or a 7-step Korean skincare routine. He looks polished and pretty. To be fair, it's not just Resynced I feel this way about. It's more of a byproduct of our current generation of AAA games where, in our quest for realism and perfection, have we lost some of the rawness and grit?
I'll gently rise and I'll softly call.
For now, let us just mourn the original Black Flag.
Joy be with you all. Good night and joy be with you. you all.
Have you played Resynced or the original? Let's discuss in the comments what you think about them. And as always, for you keeners out there, research notes are in the description. Drop another comment and let me know what game you want me to cover next. Bye!